So, uh, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank you all for coming out. I'm Jamie Webb. I'm the Assistant Planner with the City of Easthampton. I'm here with City Planner Jeff Bagg and Ted Harvey, Senior Planner at Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. The purpose of today's public hearing is to have a presentation discussion regarding the proposed coronavirus relief community development block grant application. Before we go too much further, I'd like to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast live on Easthampton Public Access TV channel 191, thanks to Easthampton Media. We have about an hour to have this conversation, I'm going to just give you a little bit of background, some brief overview, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ted for some more details. So as you may or may not be aware, the Community Development Block Grant funding comes from the federal government and is given to state governments to then administer. The coronavirus relief passed as the CARES Act, which amongst other monies gave $20 million to the Department of Housing and Community Development to administer to non-entitlement communities. About half of that $20 million is being allocated to support a rental housing support program, and the other half, which the $10 million is the subject of this competitive grant application. The City of Easthampton's teamed up with Granby, Hadley, Hatfield, South Hadley, Westhampton, and Southampton to apply for a microenterprise assistance grant program. The most that any one community can apply for is $400,000. So combined, we would be limited to about a few million dollars. We're still trying to determine the exact amount that is needed, but we expect it to be between $1 million and $1.5 million. We have a survey out on to local businesses, which is helping us to determine the need. So if you have not yet taken that survey, I would encourage you to go to the Easthampton Planning Department webpage. There's a link to the survey at the top of that page, and the website is easthamptonma.gov/planning. The application is due to the state a week from Friday on June 12th. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ted, and we'll follow that with question and answer.
All right.
If there's anything, please go ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks everyone for joining this public hearing. If you can't hear me, just wave and we'll try to figure it out. So I won't take up too much time because I want to have time for questions from anybody. I think that's the important part for this meeting. This is similar, as Jamie said, this is similar to money the city has got in the past, the CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant money. It's a competitive application, and again, as she noted, that this is a specific for the CARES Act that came out, and so it's kind of in this weird time that's not our normal application, and there's also some different things that we can apply for that we don't normally focus on when we have our normal application. So the two main things that this application it allows municipalities in Massachusetts to apply for are public social services and micro-enterprise business assistance. So Easthampton is really focusing on the business assistance. I think it's fair to say that, especially from our survey that Jamie mentioned, it's clear that a lot of our businesses have been hit pretty hard by this. So this is kind of the way the city has been wanted to focus this application. I will also say quickly that we're doing this as a regional application. The state highly recommended that where possible to have regional applications. Primarily, I think they don't want two applications. So this is a regional one. Communities in our area. So there's Easthampton will be the lead community. Granby, Hadley, Hatfield, Southampton, South Hadley, and Westhampton. And they are all on board as far as applying for this funding. So that kind of tails into what Jamie mentioned about the cap on this for the application. So each municipality is allowed up to $400,000 for their application. So hypothetically, this could be a much larger application, but as she mentioned, there's only about $9.5 million for the whole state. So we have to keep that in mind when we're putting this application together. So we're looking at probably no more than 1.5 million for an application. It might be a bit less than that, depending on how many responses we get and what we kind of see as the need out there. So the other thing that is important about this is, as I mentioned, it's for micro enterprise businesses. So it's pretty specific as far as if we're funded for this this grant, what businesses can apply for it. And I can go into some more I'm not going to do that right now, but if people have questions, I can go into some more details. There's also on the planning department's website, there's a good one-page summary of all the requirements that a business would have to meet to apply for this funding. So that is important now, but it obviously will be a lot more important if and when we get the funding. But if people have questions about that after I stop talking, I can go into that a little bit more. The other piece I want to make sure everyone was aware that this is, so the $400,000, the cap for each municipality. However, the actual grants themselves, when a business would apply to the city for a grant, the cap is $10,000. There are limits to what that can fund, and again, those are on that one-page sheet I mentioned, and I can talk a little bit more about those if people want to hear about it. So I'll leave it at that for now, but there are limits about what this funding can fund. A question came up I just want to address now from another town, I think. So if other funding has been received by a business before this, other federal funding, the question was, could a business still apply for this funding? And at least according to the state, they believe that you can still apply for this funding. They have a question out to the federal government to make sure that's correct. But as far as we know, then you would be allowed to apply for this funding. I think, I'm trying to think if there's any other important points I want to bring up before we open it to questions. So yes, I just reiterate, there is a survey. So this is a competitive application. So we're trying to get we haven't known about this for very long. So it's very quick turnaround. So we're trying to get as much data as possible in the shortest amount of time. So there is a survey that's available for businesses. It's pretty basic. It will probably take you about 5 minutes, if that. And it kind of gets a little bit at what your needs would be and if you would be potentially eligible. It doesn't qualify you or it doesn't make you 100% eligible, but at least it gives us a sense of what potential businesses out there might be eligible for this funding. And again, the deadline is the 12th, June 12th. So we'll be getting that application in before then. I think that's it for me for now, but obviously if there are questions, comments, concerns, we can answer them.
I'm just gonna, while people are maybe thinking about some questions, I'm going to just share the screen with you about the program eligibility requirements as sort of issued by the Department of Housing and Community Development. This document is also linked to on our planning department page, easthamptonma.gov/planning, if you'd like to look at it in more detail or download it. Jeff, is there anything that you'd like to add before we open up for question and comments?
I think the only question I have, maybe others would have it, is, do you have any? It's a new program, but is there any understanding of how long? So the application goes in June 12th. Is there any expectation or understanding of when the turnaround would be to learn if we were awarded it?
I can say that there's no set dates for that at the moment. I think they're gonna, the goal is to get this money out as quickly as possible. So I think the state is trying to do as quick a turnaround from that June 12th deadline to when we would actually see it. You know, in all honesty, there's we have to wait for the application to be reviewed, and then they would let us know if we got the funding. Then there are contracts that have to be signed between the city and the state. And then after that, the money would be made available. And then we could start, I mean, ahead of time, once we knew we had the money, we could probably start income qualifying businesses. But up until that point, we're probably looking at, I'll be conservative maybe and say like by the end of the summer, that money would be potentially available, but don't hold me to that. And they do want it, they are, the state, when I say they, I mean the state is looking for this, like I said, this money to get out there as quickly as possible, and also be, they want it spent and they want it used for our businesses quickly. So I think this is kind of taking a priority for what they're doing. So I think they're gonna put all their efforts into doing it quickly. We'll leave it at that.
I'm going to add, because this money is being administered through the Community Development Block Grant Program, we, in addition to the restrictions on microenterprise businesses, which are fewer than five or fewer employees, there are also requirements related to income qualifications to make sure that the funds go towards people who are business owners, families that are considered low or moderate income. And typically that's done by looking at tax returns from the previous year. But given the loss of income that many people have experienced due to the coronavirus, there'll be an alternative method of trying to qualify people. But it is not a microenterprise business program that can just go to anyone. There are strict guidelines, and I just wanted to emphasize that. There will be an income qualification process once we get awarded the funding. Are there any questions from anyone watching? Comments?
I guess if you have a question or comment, we're just gonna have them raise their hand or?
Yeah, let's see. Oops, sorry, trying to figure this out. Joanne.
So do you have to put into the application for the income qualifying what the regional application is going to choose, whether you're going to do like the past 8 weeks of pay or income and then project forward, or tax returns? What do you know you're going to use?
So that is something that, as part of the grant application, we will have to specify what our program is going to look like. Preliminarily, we will be first doing an assessment based off 2019 tax returns. And then if people would be over income, but think that their last 8 weeks would support their, would show that they qualify, then we will look at that. But the initial look will be, will be at the 2019 tax returns.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Let me see. Let me figure out how to mute. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for sharing this information. I was just going to say that it's a little disappointing that the business had to be started before January 1st, because I know this isn't your criteria, but I'm in a situation with someone that lost their job because of the pandemic, and so is pivoting and trying to start a new business in this climate. She lost a job with the city. And I've also lost income as a result. And so we're kind of like pivoting and trying to come up with a new business as a result of COVID. So it's too bad that there's not opportunities for people like that. So I'm just putting that population in mind that lost what they had before and are trying to start something new.
I agree. It is quite unfortunate that that is the case, but these requirements about the business having been in place, having been in operation since January 1st, 2019, comes directly from the Mass Department of Housing and Community Development. So that's not something that we can just sort of waive for this grant application. We unmute you.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that, but I just want, as a city, to keep that population in mind, that there's other people who lost everything that they had and are trying to start something new. So just as we go forward as a city.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, I'm off mute. I think I understand Lindsay's comment, and I appreciate that. The city did receive another, substantially smaller, but the city did receive a $30,000 grant for small businesses. So it might be another avenue for other businesses to pursue. So I just checked, it's on the homepage. It's actually right on the first list of items. It's just entitled Small Business Grants. I'll be honest, I haven't looked at the criteria, but I understand that it's not subjected to some of the same requirements that come from DHCD. So it may be another opportunity for someone who might not be eligible for this program, but who needs assistance. So it's just something else to be aware of.
Joanne, did you have another question? Anyone else?
Do participants have the ability to unmute themselves, or no? Okay. So one thing that we've done, and that's a pretty safe bunch here of people, do you want to unmute and just ask if anyone has anything else to add? I don't know. I just want to make sure we don't miss anybody.
Yeah. I turn it off. People can unmute themselves now. So if you have anything you'd like to add, you should be able to do it.
They're saying no, they can't.
Gail, would you like to?
I'm unmuted now. I'm good.
Okay.
I think it's great the city's doing all this effort to help small business. That's fabulous. Should be commended. It's never simple and it's always a lot of work. So thank you.
Thank you.
So people do have the ability to unmute, because I don't see a lot of people without video on, so I can't see if anybody's waving. I guess if people they could chat and say if they had something to say.
Unfortunately, we've turned off chat.
No.
So,
Don't try the chat. Never mind.
the regional application is not doing any social services. You're looking to do everything for micro.
That's correct. Yeah.
It sounded like that.
Yeah. I think there was just, to go a little further, I think there was just the perceived need. And now that we've got a lot of those surveys back to, that was just, there, as we said, there is the cap. And I think, Joanne, that there's just, yeah, it's not a lot of money when you boil it down per community at the end of the day. So just focusing on the micro enterprise, I think, is the important thing to do.
Yes, so. Go ahead. Can you just, it says Jennifer on your screen.
Yeah.
You're unmuted. You should be able to.
Oh, try now. Try now. Oh, now he's muted again. Now everyone's mute.
No, we're not mute.
Okay.
Hi.
Can you hear us now?
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Yeah.
My name is Steve, and we're from Sacred Roots Healing. We're body workers. We were directly affected, shut down pronto, and we have everything is body related. We teach classes that are
Well, the point
body
is
related.
that the grant requirement said that you have to be a business that's still happening, but we're slowly getting phased in.
Yeah.
So does that count?
Yes. So to be the grant requirements were that you had to be in establishment, currently in operation and established prior to January 1st, 2019. And clarification from Mass DHCD so that currently in operation was a business that, prior to COVID was in operation, or that that you have not ceased operations. So as long as you're still intending to come back,
Yeah, we're trying. I guess the hard part is as the months go on, the rent is accruing, and we're waiting for some of these grants, and we just don't, if we don't get them, then we're just in super debt. So we're trying. We missed the first round of grants. We were busy trying to get taxes done, and we had two businesses, so it just was a lot. And it's just, we're trying to weigh all our options now, and we're starting to get phased back in, but with a lot of restrictions. Yeah. And we don't know if it's enough to be able to pay our rent. So it's hard for us to hang on without knowing when the end, or when we might have an answer so we can make decisions. Yeah. And I noticed that it said June 5th, but you guys are saying June 12th. And I'm just wondering what the difference between those two dates are.
The state first set an application deadline of June 5th, and then a couple days later extended it to June 12th. But the information that we had already put on our website went with that original grant application date. But they realized
the survey. Will there be a way for us to know if it got approved? Yeah,
so we are using that for people who did fill out the survey. That is also going to be forming the basis of our contact and interest list. So assuming that we get funded, we will then contact everyone who filled out that survey to get follow-up information and see if people are still interested in actually applying for the grant funds. We'll be also doing other outreach at that point in time as well.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
How are you? I know you said that the survey would be available on your website. Is that where it is?
Correct. easthamptonma.gov/planning.
Okay, will you put it in the newspaper too, to make sure you get as many small businesses to complete the survey? Like, would you do other advertising of it?
We've been putting it on Facebook and have reached out to the surrounding communities to try to help publicize it in their communities. There was a legal ad that went out for this program to announce a public hearing, which also had a link to the survey in it.
I think the Chamber of Commerce also had it, and then I believe they sent it out to their, much larger list that they have.
I was just curious, with our library closed, it's starting to reopen now, for other people that maybe don't have electronic access. How would they find out?
I'll jump in too. I think as Jamie said, originally the state gave a tiny window, and there was a lot of Jamie, Ted, and myself and others, concerted effort to just even get this hearing in place. This hearing was intended to make sure that we had the hearing before June 5th. So then I think it was just a couple days ago that they extended the application deadline. And Ted, you can probably correct me if I'm wrong, or Jamie, that we're just trying to make sure that we get some data that we can use to support the application. It's not technically required at this point, but we think that with what we already have, we can show the need, and then we would do outreach along the way. Especially if we were awarded, then we would certainly reach back out and make sure that everyone knew that we actually had the funding. But that was a very tight timeline that we were working on just to get the hearing to occur before what we thought was going to be the June 5th deadline. So sorry to add that.
Yeah, no, that's right. And so, yeah, to the Gail, to your point, that any further outreach, we'll definitely be doing more outreach. We may do something a little more robust in the paper, especially if we're funded too, than just the survey advertising this. So there'll be more than this quick survey that we were trying to, as Jeff said, we were trying to get as much simple data as we could ahead of time, just for the application piece of it. And then if funded, then we'll do a much larger targeted outreach. But in the meantime, I mean, as we said, the deadline has been moved to next Friday, so we can do some more outreach as well to get more information.
Oh, that's good to hear. I guess when it was mentioned that the people that did the survey would be contacted, the applications were available. I just wanted to make sure, that if somebody missed the survey, how would they know the application's available?
No, that's a good point.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, good. Thank you. That will work.
Thank you, Gail. So, anyone else? Okay. Unless anyone speaks up, raises their hand, or okay.
Do you feel like you have gotten enough to submit from the feedback, just of the questionnaires? Like, to say that, you are.
We need the funding here.
You are totally, in need of this, because we're all dependent upon, like, we appreciate this opportunity because we missed all the other ones because everything is still in transition. So great opportunity that
we're super grateful. Thank you guys so much.
So we've received about 70 responses on the survey. About 50 of those responses show that there is need amongst those 50 respondents for this type of funding. So we are, or let me rephrase that, there's need through all of them, but of the 50 or so responses that were actually qualified as micro enterprise, there were some businesses that responded that don't meet that have more than more than 5 employees, so not counting them for this application. But yeah, it is showing the need, and we're just trying to get any data that we can have to show to demonstrate to DHCD that to sort of justify the amount of money that we're requesting, and that there is that need out here. Ted's done some more research into it, and I think he said it was a 15% unemployment rate in Easthampton in April. So we're trying to get as much data as we can to support the application. If you know of anyone who hasn't taken that survey, I'd encourage you to forward them the link.
I have one last question. I heard you mention that if you were to qualify, the money wouldn't probably come until like later in the summer. But if you do qualify, will you know that earlier? Or are you gonna actually like qualify and then get the money at that time frame? Because timing for us is kind of crucial, because summer is our very slow time, and that might make or break us in regards to, like, if we know ahead of time, like say we did qualify, we did get it, but we won't actually be receiving it until August or so. Is that something still in the works, or is there, do you guys have an answer for that?
We don't expect to hear back from the state that we've received grant funding probably until August. So assuming that we receive the grant funding in August, as soon as we know that we've received the grant funding, we're going to advertise that we have the funding available, and we'll start to do those income qualifications. At that point in time, we're still trying to figure out what the process will be. You know, assuming that there is, if there's more funding than there is need, then everyone will get funded. If there is more need than there is funding, part of our program design will be to figure out how we can equitably distribute that funding, whether or not it's, you know, everyone gets a percentage of what they ask for, or if it's a lottery-based system, but we will have a equitable manner of distributing those funds. Assuming that an individual income qualifies, you know, we'll have to figure out how to what that timeline is going to be.
I'm not an expert in this, but I would encourage you to take a look at the planning website, because there are some criteria that you could begin to review now. You know, the income qualification is one of the most critical ones. So there are some resources that you can start to look at now to see if you would qualify. I think, like, to just do a little assessment. This is something that we're trying really hard to go after. So it is going to take a little bit of time, but I do want to go back to something I said earlier about the city did get, it's a much smaller amount of money, but as we were talking, I did go on and look, and so it's right on the Easthampton homepage, and there is another source that you should potentially look at, and it says that there's going to be information in terms of criteria and process that comes out on June 15th. So, you know, one thing that people can do is potentially go in and look and see if you're going to be within the income qualification range. And then, you know, if not, then definitely look at this other grant. And I know that, you know, the mayor and others are looking really hard for any sources of funding that we can provide kind of locally. So I would say that we're really kind of just doing everything we can. And I guess this is the first glimpse of what we're trying to do. So I would encourage you to look online and see what the income qualifications kind of look like.
Yeah, so we saw that we saw that we were we saw that we met most of the qualifications, but I don't remember seeing income specifically.
Yeah, so I'm going to bring up that
I'm looking at it.
So that's the qualifications, and under the eligibility criteria is that the microenterprise businesses must meet certain low to moderate income requirements as established by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. To document compliance with HUD income requirements, applicants must be able to provide income documentation, 2018 or 2019 tax returns, both business and personal, or income can be documented based on the past 8 weeks and then projected out for an annual amount. Okay. And just as a note, we will be able to pay or to provide grant funds retroactively. So if you, but only going back as far as the, in this case, it'll be the application deadline of June 12th will be the furthest back that the funds can retroactively go back to.
Let me just say something quickly on the income qualification. So there are, as it does mention here briefly, that there are federal income qualifications for the business owner or owners. And then so they're not, we don't have them up here, but we can provide that. It's on the HUD web, but you know, I won't make anyone go try and find that. But we can get that information up here as well, just so as Jeff said, so you're thinking about it ahead of time. So we can do that. And it will be by number of people in your household. So it will be pretty self-explanatory once we post that for you, but it's easily I can easily get it for you and put it on the website.
Are there any further questions, comments?
No, thank you again. We really appreciate this info and you guys like going strongly for this. We greatly appreciate it.
Let me just say one more thing, Jamie, actually, that I don't know why that reminded me, but so the survey that we keep mentioning, there's a section at the end for those of you who have taken it, but if anyone else takes it, that you recommend that they take it, there's a place for comments. And while it doesn't really provide the hard and fast data, it's actually when we're putting that application together, I do like at least looking at those and using some of those as anecdotal. They kind of make the story, for lack of a better word, a lot better and more personal. So those actually are really helpful, and they're also just helpful to have. So the city itself knows kind of, we can see the data numbers obviously, but also just kind of have the words that go along with that. So those that you have, I've read through most of them now, and those that you have provided comments, that's very helpful. And if other people want to fill out the survey, I just recommend that definitely throw some, your own, what you are personally, or your business is personally going through. So just throwing that out there.
Thank you.
So at this point, I'm going to close the public hearing. If you have any further questions or comments, if you think of things, please feel free to reach out to me. You can email me at jwebb, that's JWEBB, at easthamptonma.gov. My contact info is also on the planning department page for the city. We all really appreciate everyone coming out, taking the time this afternoon to sit through this meeting and support this grant application. So thank you all again for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.